It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Engage, Educate, and Empower, a podcast which aims to make a difference in the lives of children, teenagers, and young adults all around the world. Each week, we have a very special guest that can share their perspective on the issues and life challenges that our kids are facing today. And as we all know, it is a very, very hostile, war-filled, combative, not so pleasant society out there. And I'm talking everywhere. Every country seems to have some issues, some challenges. We have global warming, we have the migration problem, we have riots, we have the threat of nuclear war, you name it. These are all issues that our kids have to deal with as they're still growing and developing. Add on to that the internet and social media and the risk of cyberbullying, drug addiction, alcoholism, gangs, you name it. Certainly kids today are facing issues that I did not when I was a child growing up in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And so today, my guest is somewhat different. It's Derrich Phillips, who is a husband, father, proud veteran of the United States Army, and the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Poverty, Powerball, Turn Adversity into Your Winning Ticket. Now, a little while ago, I actually was a guest on his podcast, Mentor Select. And after talking with him, I realized that I needed to have him on my podcast because just recently he's released a series of children's books, which he will talk about on this podcast. He is the founder and chief mentor at Mentor Select, which creates books, podcasts, and training courses to help prepare children and teenagers to become successful adults. And Derrich earned his master's degree in business administration from Grand Canyon University. Now, the books that he released, I think they were only about maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, and already they're on the bestseller list. But many of the schools and libraries where he lived are now taking this book and putting it in their school libraries, so easy access for the kids. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we return, it would be my pleasure to introduce you to Derrich Phillips.
Tracey Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer, and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit traceymaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at traceymaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to traceymaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at TraceyMaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at TraceyMaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
So welcome back, everybody, and as promised, I'd like to introduce you to my very special guest today, Derrich Phillips. So thank you for joining me. I mentioned to everyone that I had done your podcast, and after the podcast, I discussed the need to have you on my podcast because of the books that you have just written. So please, can you hold them up for me?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to bring my books with me. Be on your podcast.
Father Figures, which is awesome. Tina's First Dance and Larry's Journey to Manhood.
Yes.
And I've been seeing on social media that libraries have picked them up, but lots of schools are actually taking the copies and putting them in their school libraries for the kids to read, which is great.
Yeah, we're very thrilled about that. When we were writing the books, we didn't really imagine being in schools. We wanted kids to read it.
Yes, I know. It's quite a contrast because you wrote the #1 bestseller, right? Poverty Powerball.
Yes.
And now you've gone to Father Figures. So what prompted you to write the books, the children's books?
So while I was writing Poverty Powerball, it's more so for teens and young adults. So I cover some really serious issues in that book. But I knew I wanted to have a counterpart to that book and that's where the idea for Father Figures came in.
Okay.
And I had the idea to write the boys' version, Larry's Journey to Manhood. And when I told my wife about it, she was like, "Oh, I love the idea, but what about the girls?"
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't know the girl story. I know the boys' story, but
right.
You feel free to write the girl story if you want. And she decided to take me up on that offer and wrote her first book. It really
That's awesome.
Turned out great.
So what is the story for those listening who are and actually watching? What is the story about?
Absolutely. So basically, just back up a little bit, my vision with Father Figures is I really want every child to benefit from having positive male role models in their life. And that's in the form of father figures, whether it's coaches, teachers, any positive male role model. So that's really the whole vision of the books. Now, the boys' version, Larry's Journey to Manhood, it's a book series. So Larry and Tina, they're brother and sister. So both of them, their father's not in the house, but they both feel that void. They're like, okay, I need a father. I need these. So I don't have my biological father in the house, but what about father figures? And that's the whole goal, to help kids discover. Really believe it takes a village to raise them. And even if they don't have biological fathers in the household, there's always positive male role models all around. They just have to identify them and just inquire for that mentorship. So
yes.
with Larry's journey to manhood, essentially his mother, in both books, she's essentially the hero in the book, because she's the one that identifies those positive male role models, which some are family members, some are friends,
right.
And some are coaches, and say, hey, Larry would like to shadow you for a day. And essentially Larry goes to shadow each father figure at their place of employment and just learns valuable life lessons through those experiences, and really what it takes to be a man of character.
I love it. And of course, obviously, the same thing is with Tina, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much the same concept with Tina. And my wife, with Tina's book, she wanted to focus on exposing girls to careers that are traditionally dominated by men.
Okay.
And so kind of has a dual role where she's exposing them to just those careers and planting that seed that, hey, me as a little girl, I can grow up to be this, whether it's a pilot, doctor, whatever career that may traditionally be dominated by men, planting that seed to let them know, hey, you can do it as well.
I think it's amazing, and I thank you for doing it because, I mean, kids, they love books when they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to read them, and when there's illustrations, it draws them in as well and gives them a better connection. But it's funny, I had just recorded a podcast a while ago with Daniel Blanchard, who's a teacher,
Okay.
and he said a couple of years ago, a friend of his, they decided to start an after school group, an activity group, because there were so many boys primarily that did not have that father figure, that role model in their life.
Right.
And they found that when they started it, it was so empowering because they, similar to the book, they would bring community figures into the gym or the center, wherever they happen to be, and they would share their story of what it is to, to grow up to be a man, and good manners and politeness, and that you don't abuse women and you must
Right.
be respectful. And he said that it was so empowering for them because all these kids were lost. They had turned to, crime and truancy and drugs because they didn't have that role model who could guide them as to, well, this is actually what you need to do. So I think the books are great. Now, you mentioned that your first book, the number one bestseller, was more for teenagers and young adults. And so can you tell me what was that book about?
So that book was more so it's a memoir. It was about my
Okay.
childhood growing up
Okay.
in poverty. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, which in the 80s and 90s, in the early 90s, it had the ranking as a number one, the highest murder rate in the United States.
Wow.
So it was plagued by gangs, violence, drugs. So that's the environment I grew up in as a child. And also, I was raised by a single mother. And that eventually when I was 11 years old, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Oh
So I just
dear.
had a lot of hardships I had to overcome as a child. But looking back on them, I realized that, hey, those hardships prepared me to be a successful adult. It built that resilience. It made me persevere
Mm-hmm.
despite all of those, all of that adversity. So I wanted to capture that in the book and essentially lay out a blueprint for someone who's coming up in similar circumstances, or even worse,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that, hey, all is not lost. I can
Yes.
certainly turn this adversity into my winning ticket. And I just really wanted to outline how I did it and uh, show ways that they can do it as well.
So you mentioned that you had it was a single parent family. So who were your male role models when you were growing up?
As I mentioned, when I was 11, my mom, she was diagnosed with
Hmm.
schizophrenia. So at that point, she was no longer able to take care of me and my two
Okay.
sisters. So I went to go live with my uncle Tommy, who was her
Okay.
older brother. He's 20 years older, and he was that positive male role model for
That's
me.
good.
He had already raised two sons. They were serving in the military. He had been married for 30 years. And yeah, he was that foundation where, okay, this is what it is to be a man, not selling drugs, not disrespecting women, and
Yes.
all these negative things. So it's for kids to see, especially for boys, to really understand what it is to be a man and how do you treat women and all those things. Because if they don't see it, then they're just going to either learn it through rap or
Yes.
through rap music or just from negative sources. So certainly want to provide as many positive sources and to model that positive behavior. And yeah, my uncle Tommy definitely did that for me. In addition to him, I was heavily involved in sports. So my track coach, he was a really good role model. He had been married for a long time, raised a family, was prior military. So he taught me a lot about discipline. I just had other family members and some teachers as well.
That's good. And I like that because, I mean, the focus of this podcast and my message is, I mean, it's to engage, educate, and empower kids. And, we're talking about mental health awareness and bullying and suicide and foster care and mental illness, and giving them the tools and the strategies to, and the skill set to keep going. And also, it's for parents and teachers and any family members and adults to understand what kids are going through
Right.
and how you can talk to them and how you can help. And I know lots of people have said, well, I don't have kids, or all my kids are grown up now, and why should it matter? And to me, we have so much going on in the world right now, and I would hate to be a kid growing up. I really would, because what they have to deal with and the
Right.
pressures of being in school, and the future doesn't look rosy for them. I mean, global warming, it's in their face as well, so they don't even know if there's a world for them to actually grow up
Scary.
into. And they need positive role models. And even if they have a two-parent family, it does not necessarily mean that the mother and the father are positive role models. And
That is
so
true.
to me, I always, every time I do my posts and my YouTube videos, I always say to the kids, seek out a trusted adult. If you
Yes.
cannot confide in the teacher, the counselor, your parents, every kid needs to have a trusted adult who they can go to and who will listen to them and not judge them, and be able to be their sounding board and guide them. And to me, it takes a village to raise a kid. And so as a society, if we're going to help our kids, I believe we all need to understand what they're going through and learn how we can help them move from a dark place into a better place, because kids are so resilient. If you give them, or they are unable to learn the skill set and the strategies, they can do wonderful things. And, they can then discover themselves how to even get better at it. But it's a lot of work. And as I said, I think it's awesome what you were doing, because so many kids today are in single parent families or in foster care. And in foster care especially, you need that role model. And I believe all kids need a mother. And I'm sure lots of people are going to criticize me now because of the gender issue, where you can have two mothers and two fathers. But I think that it's always good, even if you're in a same-sex relationship, that the child or the teenager has an opportunity to know a father figure or a mother figure, depending on the same-sex relationship. And right now it seems that it is single moms more than ever are
Right.
trying to get by with their kids, do the best for them, work in multiple jobs, and father figures are definitely needed. That adult male role model,
Right.
especially.
Yeah, especially in that context for single mothers, it's just also let them know that they don't have to do it all alone. And like I said, just those positive male role models, and they just come in so many different forms. It could just be it could be a pastor, a teacher,
Yes.
a grandfather. Any male role model can, if they're positive and trusted, they're just going to be an additional resource for that single mother. So it's not about saying that you need a man to come to the rescue. It's not about that
No,
at all. It's just
no.
saying that, hey, it's a different perspective, and it's somebody that's bringing just their unique experiences
Yes.
to the it's not a conflict or trying to one up each other. It's more so,
Yeah.
yeah, just giving that child as many resources as possible, know what's best for the child.
Yes, I agree. So where you are presently, what sort of issues are you seeing predominantly in children and teenagers? Do you have a bad bullying issue in schools where you live?
Yes, certainly. My wife and I did a career day at a elementary school just this past Friday, and it was after we had already did our interview. So bullying was certainly top of mind for me, and I was asking the students like, "Hey, Father Figures is it's a children's book series. So we're going to write more books. What are some topics that we should cover?" And bullying was one of the top ones that they were mentioning.
Yes, it's it's an epidemic, and it's a
It is
global epidemic. Certainly, we tend to hear the news from the United States more so than other countries, but it's happening everywhere,
globally, yeah.
globally. And Today, I think there was a news report of a 12-year-old girl who died this morning by suicide in North Carolina. And that was related to bullying. And so it seems it's almost every single day now you're hearing of another child or teenager or young adult who has chosen to end their life because of this relentless bullying. And it's sad, it's frustrating, it's shameful, and it's very frustrating because it seems like schools and the local governments are not stepping up to get things in place.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a big part of it starts at home where adults have to lead by example.
Yes.
And adults are guilty of bullying each other on social media and being nasty to each other. So it's like kids are learning from adults.
That's
and I
right.
think it's really have to take that holistic approach and lead by example and show kids that, hey, it's not okay to gossip about other people and try to put other people down and make them feel bad. It's not okay. And I think it's something that you mentioned, that essentially the bullies, they're coming from a place of hurt. They're trying to really exercise their dominance because someone's being dominant over them. So just a vicious cycle. I certainly think it starts at home, starts with the adults modeling what's appropriate behavior and how to treat people.
And I think what's sad is that there are so many kids out there that are hurting, that are in so much pain and are not feeling good about themselves, that they then have to basically put it onto another child to try and ease their pain. And we know that never works, right? It does not work. It just continues to escalate. So you have children.
Yes, I am a new dad. I have an 8-month-old daughter. Legacy. Her name's Legacy Phillips.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Legacy Phillips. That's a lovely name. It's a lovely name. And so are you an uncle yet?
Yes, I have. I've lost track now. I have 2 nephews and 2 nieces. Yeah, 2 nephews, 2 nieces.
Okay.
And my oldest nephew is 19, and I have a niece as young as 1 year old. So it's a wide span.
So from your perspective, I'm actually going to be having some teenagers on the show to talk about what they are seeing day to day and what they're going through. What have you seen your nieces and nephews having to deal with?
I would say, so my youngest nieces and nephews, my youngest niece, second youngest, she just started kindergarten recently. So she's, I wouldn't say she's encountered too many issues yet, but certainly my nephew that's 19, his teenagers are pretty tough. He dealt with a lot in terms of just peer pressure, kids using drugs at school, just trying to fit in, gangs, just a lot of those type of issues you think about in terms of teenagers deal with. But I would say certainly peer pressure was a big one. Drug use was huge. A lot of drug abuse going on in high schools, and then just really just avoiding getting distracted by all that and losing focus of what's important as far as academics, and then of course getting crazy, just losing focus of priorities.
Right. So what kind of supports did he have? Because I'm sure did he go down the wrong path for a time, or did he stay on the right path with support and guidance?
So he walked the tightrope. He certainly has some setbacks. He has some setbacks, but he has a really strong mother, and his father, they didn't live in the same household, but he had a stepfather in the picture, had me in the picture, even though I was living in a different state, but just always talking to him, always pouring into him, always. And for me, I'm really conscious about being more so that mentor role where we're keeping those lines of communication open. I'm not judging him. I'm really just giving him a voice and trying to let him know what I experienced, but not saying, oh, so you should do this, or that, unless he's really coming to me for specific advice, but really always trying to pour into him, trying to just really hear him out and guide him, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly in the right direction. but certainly has some struggles. But he graduated from high school, no criminal record, so that's just, I'm proud of him.
That's awesome. And you said it. It's being there constantly as that person to listen to. And I think lots of parents and lots of adults forget that word, listen
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Listen to, and also like the no judgment. That's another thing. And
Right.
it's not telling them what to do. Teenagers hate being told what to do. They
Right.
like to bounce ideas, and then you, as you said, it was direct guidance and indirect guidance.
Yep.
And you give them little bits and they can take that and then they work it maybe to a solution you never thought of, but it still works and they did it themselves. And I think lots of people, lots of parents don't give their kids enough credit.
Yep.
They treat them as if they're an adult and expect them to make adult decisions. But then when there's some, life or school decisions to make, they tend to helicopter in and take over, that they know best, when really, if your kid is walking the walk and talking the talk and is in that environment, then you have to listen to what they have to say and
Right.
work with them to come to the best solution. And sometimes they have to go down a different path to find out, well, guess what? You went that way and it didn't work.
Exactly.
Let's regroup. Now let's have a look at, are there other options? Because sometimes you have to fail.
Right.
Things have to kind of fall apart for them to realize, okay, that didn't go so well. I better try another tactic. But again, it's coming back to, you've got to be there. It's those open lines of communication, which I love. And I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, some of the challenges that our kids are facing today is that there's no longer communication because everyone is holding up a device, including parents.
Right.
And when the communication does take place, sometimes it's negative communication. If there's, discipline or reprimands or, something else that's going on, and the message that kids are receiving is always bad, you're no good, worthless, negative.
Yep.
And so, yes, we have to start opening those lines of communication again with our kids and making an effort to, which means as adults, we have to put away our devices. We have to set aside time.
Yeah, we certainly do. And that's something I'm really trying to train myself on now. Even though my daughter's only 8 months, just really when I'm playing with her, when she's around, being just present, 100% present, not on my phone, because it becomes a habit. Because if I start conditioning her to think that's okay, or me condition myself to think it's okay, when she's a teenager, I'm gonna be doing the same thing. So I'm really conscious about putting devices down and being fully present. And for teenagers, that just shows them that their parents respect them, that their parents really
Yes.
value what they're saying and want to know what's really going on, and not just a default, how was your day? And it was someone I was interviewing, I can't remember right now, but she had said that a really powerful way to open up that communication and to get kids to, especially teens, where a lot of parents will say, well, they just give me one word answers or they're not communicating, is don't just say, hey, how was your day? Say, hey, what made you smile today? Who did you help today?
Yes.
What just those type of open-ended questions that's really probing them to talk to you. But like you said, it's really has to be that consistency, being present
Yes.
and respecting what they have to say, and not and treating them as a young adult.
Yes.
Because a lot of the most valuable lessons I know I've learned in life, unfortunately, some I had to learn the hard way. And as parents, I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but we want to protect our kids and don't want them to make none of the mistakes that we made. But in reality, that's just part of the process. And if we can steer them around it, great. But if we can't, help them avoid every single pitfall. So
I know, I agree. And I think the big lesson here is that kids of all ages have to understand and I hate the word failure because I don't believe anyone is a failure. It just means that you haven't attained your goal, the plan, passed the exam, made the team, whatever it was that you wanted to do. And that's
Right.
life, because if they don't understand that there are going to be ups and downs, by the time they get to a young adult, they're going to go into a particularly harsh world where all of a sudden is, what do you mean? The world doesn't
The
revolve
reality
around
check.
me, right? And that's when things can get really, really sideways. It was interesting you saying that you put down your phone when you're with your daughter. There was some research released this week that said, so the first 24 months are the real big, important time of that nurturing bond with the child. That, the eye contact, the physical contact, the voice, which is the pleasant, coo, not necessarily the cooing voice, but the nice voice that shows love and, laughter, as opposed to shouting and, derogatory comments. And they said that they had done a study, and parents who would hold a social media device in their hand as they nursed the baby or rocked the baby to sleep, or even as they were playing with the baby, were checking their phone. As that baby developed into an infant, the brain had not developed as it should have for the milestones expected.
Wow.
And that by the time that baby became a toddler, it already was showing signs of attachment disorder.
Wow.
Was seeking for love and approval because they weren't getting that. Because if you're at a device, the body language is away from the baby and there's no eye contact. And that is, it's that eye contact and that physical touch, which is what bonds the baby in those first, months and early years. So it's interesting what they're now finding with social media devices. What I find laughable is, cigarettes and alcohol and driving has an age limit, and yet social media devices, they don't, right?
Right.
And I've seen two-year-olds with phones.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times now it's just parents use it as a babysitting device. Just a way to distract them or keep them focused on something else. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not saying no. If it's something that's educational and is stimulating and that it's good for the healthy development, then yes. But then it should only be for a short period each time. It shouldn't be, here's the phone, 4 hours.
Yes, because addictive.
Right? And yes, it's a slippery slope. But
yeah, certainly. And I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier in terms of that negative reinforcement versus positive. And it's just so important for kids any age, but especially by the time for teenagers. Oftentimes their communication with their parents is going to be when they get in trouble, when they do something wrong, just that negative reinforcement. And of course that conditions the teen to say, hey, I don't want to talk to my parents. They're just going to fuss at me or tell me what I messed up or did wrong. And I think parents have to really try to take that approach of focusing on the positive first and really being light-handed when it comes to that negative reinforcement focusing on the negative.
And I'm glad you brought it up because I absolutely agree. I think in every podcast I've done so far, all the guests have brought this up, and it's in a day, if we hear one negative comment, even though we've had maybe 7 positive comments given to us, we tend to gravitate to that one negative comment and allow it to percolate. So it suddenly becomes our entire world and the negative self-talk, instead of focusing on those 6 or 7 positive comments that we had. And as adults, we need to shift our mindset. And as parents, I think just start out afresh, start out anew. And as you're trying to deal with your demons, because we all have that voice in our head, right? That tears us down every now and again.
Evil gremlin.
Right? But don't let your kids develop that voice and let it become the only voice, because it's not good, and it's leading, as I said, them down the wrong path, but it's also increasing bullying and mental illness and suicide, because they believe that they're worthless and no good and they're unloved. And so it's, even if they've done something bad, you can point it out and ask them, well, what could we do differently the next time? Because they have to learn from mistakes, and then reinforce, even if you say, you drive me crazy sometimes, look at your hair, but then come back with, but I love you to bits. I love you to bits. And it's that, and you were, gosh, I cannot believe how great you are at writing or music, and it's building them up. Kids have to be built up repeatedly, not to give them that bravado, I'm the jock, I'm everything, but when the bullying may start, or when someone just says an unkind comment, they can turn it around and say, that's your opinion, and I understand what you're saying, but I know that there are people who love me, and that I have meaning in their life. And this is what we've got to keep doing. And I think if we start helping kids develop these strategies, maybe in many instances, bullying is not going to get out of control for many of them. We're not going to stop it. But if they have that resilience, maybe we can see a turnaround there.
Yeah, I think it builds up that armor for them, and that's something my wife started doing from when my daughter was born. Like every morning, she made up a funny song. Like, she says, goes like, "You're so smart, you're so beautiful." Just those positive affirmations. She started doing it ever since she's been born. She does it consistently every morning, just really building up that armor, letting her know that she is loved, that she is beautiful, that she is someone special. And if kids hear that at home, then when someone outside their home tell them, "Hey, you're stupid," or "You're ugly," or at least they know they have that most primary source, your parents telling them different, and they know that hey, that's not true.
And if the parents are the ones that are doing the negative self-talk, then hopefully there's other family or teachers or a role model, an adult who can actually, point out, okay, well, mom and dad, are going through some difficulties and they're not thinking correctly, but I want you to know this is how good you are. This is how amazing you are. You got to have someone in a kid's corner. You absolutely have to. Otherwise, these poor kids are not going to make it.
Because as adults, we need to hear that. So certainly kids do.
No, it is. And again, it's that reinforcement of you have to tell them and mean it and show it. Buying them the new iPhone is not conveying how much you love them, because that's materialistic. You have to actually say the words. And, you may not say, I love you. There may be other ways you convey how important they are. But we've got to start doing that. And I think it's awesome what your wife is doing, because, I mean, we have to build up girls and boys. And it's, it's a cruel world out there, and they need a really good suit of armor when they go out. Adults need it too, but kids really need to have a good protective coat on so they can face anything.
Yeah, they definitely do. And you had asked earlier about my nephew, as far as some issues he dealt with as a teen. I'd almost forgot. After I got out of the Army, I was 20, just turned 23. My little sister came to live with me, and I became her legal guardian. She was 13 at the time, and she lived with me until she graduated high school. So I almost forgot all about that experience of my teen. And as the two daughters and son now, that's a 1-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old. But yeah, that was a great experience. But certainly in my early 20s, I wasn't nowhere near as mature as I am now at 36. So it was a lot of trial and error and just learning. But it was good on the job experience training.
And I must be honest, no parent knows what it's like until they have, certainly once they've had one, obviously it gets easier with the second, third, or however many they have. And if they have a very, very supportive family, it can make that journey a little easier, more manageable. But for most new mums and dads, I mean, wow, I have the utmost respect for them, the same
Yeah,
as I have for teachers, because you're navigating uncharted territory. And at
right,
the end of the day, everyone is trying to do the very best for that child. And, I think just where we are right now in this time, that I think we just have to be a little more cautious and a little bit more giving
yeah,
with children, with teenagers, with young adults, because I mean, you're much younger than I am, but I'm sure even your experience, as you said, growing up, because you went to live with your uncle,
right,
um, is going to be different to what your daughter is going to experience when it's her turn to go to school. And
right.
things are changing in the world where, there is so much uncertainty, and uncertainty is not good for kids. It creates anxiety and fear.
Right.
And, we have a responsibility to help them navigate these dark waters.
Yeah, absolutely. And soon as parents, soon as we think we figured it out, something changes. So just have to
Yes.
remain flexible. Yes, indeed.
And at the end of the day, I think it's the family unit of showing love, giving love.
Yep.
Whatever happens, we're always going to be there for you, and we will love you no matter what. And I think that's something that teenagers, especially today, need to listen to, because I mean, I think I mentioned on you when I was on your podcast, of those that attempted to die by suicide and actually lived, every single one of them had said they didn't feel they would be missed and no one
Right.
loved them. And that to me is 16, 14, 17. This is what you think, that the world is better off without you. That has to change.
Yeah.
That no child anywhere should be ever made to feel that they're unwanted and unloved.
Yeah. Totally agree.
So with your mentor select, I'm going back to the business, when you say,
Yes.
so books, podcasts, training courses to help prepare children and teenagers become successful adults. Briefly,
Yes.
give us an overview of what kind of courses do you offer?
So essentially, I created an online course where it was inspired by my book, Poverty Powerball. In that
Okay.
book, I have 10 chapters and it goes over, I call it winning tickets, and then basically the lesson I learned from that experience. And so I just took that and put it into a course, and I co-created with a guy by the name of Jerry Clark, who's done hundreds of courses. And we added the scientific research in, and just really ways that the course takers can apply those principles to make that transformation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're almost out of time.
Oh no, having too
I
much
know,
fun.
I know. But I want to say thank you so much. And to anyone who's watching or listening, you got to take a look at the books. The books are awesome. I love them.
Cool.
And kids love books. When we
Right.
get to teenagers, maybe not so much,
You have to
but
get creative on how we
right,
teach them.
you
Yeah.
have to be creative with them. But certainly kids love books, and the earlier that we can nurture them and help them develop their mindset to kindness, and what is correct and polite, and just how to speak to adults, how to speak to other kids, how to play fair. Those are just such great skills and values that all kids need to have, so they're prepared to go through life. So I want to thank you so very much for your time, and we're going to take
Certainly. Absolutely.
thank you. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and there you'll see all the links, everything you need to know to get hold of him and to follow him on social media. And please check out his books. And I'll be right back.
Derrich Phillips is a husband, father, proud veteran of the United States Army, motivational keynote speaker, a change expert, and the author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Poverty Powerball, Turn Adversity into Your Winning Ticket. Derrich grew up in a world full of gangs, drug and alcohol abuse, and violence. He's also battled ADHD that made him struggle throughout school. Now he's an inspirational speaker and instructs students and educators. He teaches them how to get battle ready to defeat any adversity that they face. Derrick's the founder and chief mentor at Mentor Select, which creates books, podcasts, and training courses to help prepare children and teenagers to become successful adults. Derrick and his wife own several successful businesses, and along with serving his country, he's earned a bachelor's and 2 master's degrees from Grand Canyon University. Connect with Derrick at DerrichPhillips.com, on Facebook at Derrich.Phillips, and on LinkedIn and Instagram, both at Derrich Phillips.
Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Engage, Educate, Empower with Derrich Phillips. I do apologize. We did have some technical difficulties at intervals throughout the podcast, and I hope it didn't ruin your enjoyment. Please be sure to check out his 2 books, Father Figures. They are available on Amazon.com, in fact, any Amazon. And before I conclude this podcast, I thought I would share a statement, a thought that I actually say at the end of every podcast where I'm the guest. And so as the host, I thought I should start saying this on my podcast. So my parting words are to any parent, guardian, foster parent, any family member. If there is a child, teenager, young adult in your life or in the home, I ask you right now to take the time to go and see them. Turn off the TV, turn off your social media device. It's only going to take 40 seconds to a minute tops. I want you to go and sit with them. So be on their level. I want you to look at them and I want you to make contact, and you know what body contact is appropriate for them, whether or not it's a touch on the hand, a hug, a cuddle, a squeeze, or pat on the shoulder. And I want you to tell the child, the teenager, the young adult, how proud you are of them, and how much you love them, and you would do anything for them. Now, I know it sounds very simple, and I'm sure that, many of you will go, yeah, right. And maybe when you go there, your child or your teenager pushes you away and says, what are you doing? Get off me. What's going on? But understand the time you took to be with them, the connection you made by touching them and looking at them and sharing those words, regardless of what they said, it has struck a chord and it's deep in their heart and soul. And when you walk away, make a commitment that you're going to do this regularly, because you do not know what's going through your kid's mind. You do not know what they were planning to do. They could be planning to self-harm, drugs, alcohol, go out, commit a crime, engage in risky behavior. They may be a bully. They may have been planning to do something, or they may have even been planning to end their life by suicide. So take the time and show your kids how important he or she, they are to you, and how much you love them. You will not regret it, and the kid will feel loved and safe and empowered. Thank you for your time, and join me again next Thursday for another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower. Have a good week.